Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another presentation of our High Peaks New Year's Reunion Bash. My name is Carolyn Regula, and I will be hosting the events for this reunion. Berkshire High Peaks Festival is a part of Close Encounters with Music, and the mission of Close Encounters is to engage the imagination of diverse concert audiences in a welcoming setting, connecting listeners to performers and composers and fostering the excitement and sense of community that live performance builds. Also to establish a comfortable listening environment, turning performances into enriching and educational experiences. I'm very excited personally as a string player for our talk today, and it's going to be very fascinating, many tips. If you have any questions for our guest, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and I will be monitoring those questions throughout the presentation. If you want to talk amongst yourselves, please feel free to use the chat window. And I don't want to give too much away because to welcome our guest speaker, we have Close Encounters with Music Artistic Director, Yehuda Hanani.
Thank you, Carolyn. It is a great pleasure. I'm delighted to have Francis with us virtually under normal circumstances. He is our repairer, our luthier in residence, and he rescues us time and again. He helps us with instruments and bows and rehairs and strings and emergency situations. So unfortunately today we cannot do this, but I thought it would be great to have him just to give us some tips about maintaining our instruments, especially since we don't have easy access nowadays to a repair shop, winter conditions, etc. So, Francis, welcome. Wonderful to see you, and please give us some of your tremendous knowledge.
Thank you so much. Well, first of all, what you need to know is and you all do know, string instruments do not do well with extremes of dryness or excessive moisture, and which is why we need to intervene on their behalf, especially in the wintertime. There we go. Even if you live in a milder climate, you need to be aware of how your instrument is affected by humidity. So that's what I'd like to discuss today. So you all are aware of how humidity causes havoc with instruments. People in climates that have constant humidity do very well in terms of damage on their instrument. When we speak of humidity, we use the term relative humidity because that indicates the amount of humidity that's available to your instrument at a certain temperature. I think most of us live in temperate climates where there's a daytime difference in temperature between summer and winter. In the Berkshire Hills of Massachusetts, there's a 60 to 70 degree difference. In warm, humid summer months here, when it cools down at night, you'll see the grass become soaking wet. The cool air of night will not hold as much humidity as in the day, and it condenses and falls to the ground. In the winter months, when most of the humidity is already condensed and fallen in the snow, indoors, humidity levels of our central heating falls to a very low percentage. So if you are in your room practicing, you will need the humidity that you are not getting. So, sorry for that babbling. The point is that we need to be aware of what is the humidity. It's not exactly the humidity itself that is a problem. It's the change, it's the flux in humidity. And so if the humidity stayed the same all year long, as I was saying before, it wouldn't be a problem. So I'll tell you just a quick sad story. We sold an instrument for $3,000 and to a lovely young woman, and and I gave her a case and I put a humidifier in it, and I filled it with water, one of these little case humidifiers, and I instructed them how to do it. They took it home, and then I didn't hear, it was in January, they took it home, and in March, or the beginning of March, I got a call from the mom that the instrument had cracked. And so I took a look at it and I asked them, well, had you filled the humidifier? And they said, no, she didn't think about it. So it's such a shame that the small things like that, people just have to get into the habit of using humidity and using it wisely. So you can use any type of method that you want. You can have a humidifier in your room, which is what we have. We have a, I would show it to you, but it's a 6-gallon device, which is does last for about 4 days, and it keeps, and we set it at 40%, and it does all the 100 instruments that we have in our shop without having to worry about it. And every 4 days or so, I put in another 6 gallons, and I don't have to think about it. The problem with having, oh, something's coming up here. Sorry.
You don't need to worry about that, Francis. That's just me sending messages to our guests.
Oh, sorry. I just
continue.
I don't see you anymore.
That's okay. I'm here.
Okay. Let's see, where was I? The
6 days.
Yeah, every 6 days. So the problem with smaller humidifiers like dampits and case humidifiers and whatnot, you need to remember to fill them. And that is the crux of the whole thing. You need to just, on a daily basis. So my recommendation for this is, first of all, to get a hygrometer. And it's going to cost $10 to $20 at a hardware store, and make sure it is working and get used to looking at it every day. It should be in your practice room or wherever you're going to be working, and look at it every day, see what the humidity level is. That is really the crux of it, because if you don't know what your humidity level is, then why would you even think about humidifying or refilling your device, whatever it is. So for us, what works the best is a large scale humidifier. It costs, I think it was $100, and it's pretty quiet. Actually, it's quieter than some of the small ones. And I almost recommend the larger ones more, simply because you don't have to be filling them up so much. So it makes it just a little more convenient. And this one especially is not so loud. And loudness is, of course, an issue when you're practicing. Let me talk about what happens with when you don't have enough humidity. So the first things, and I'm sure you know about these, the first thing that you notice is you open up your case and you pull out your instrument, and the pegs, one or two or all of them, if you're unlucky, have unraveled during the night. And that should be a warning sign to you that this is important. Stop, get water, help. Of course, I and most other people just put the pegs back in and go happily, blithely back to playing. So that would be the first indication that you need to go out and get yourself a humidifier, or you need to start your humidifier up. And actually, you should do it long before that happens, because already that's sort of a sign of stress. The next thing you might notice is that the instrument is not sounding up to where it usually does, and that is a good indication. And so don't just play through that. Do something about it. Go and get some water, and that's the whole issue right there. What happens in the wintertime is the instrument is losing all its moisture and contracting. And as it contracts, the whole top and the back press down on the sound post and make it tighter. So your luthier is going to do a slight adjustment so there's not quite as much pressure. And of course, the opposite is the case in the summertime when things swell up with humidity. They're going to give it a little more tension because the distance between the back and the top of the instrument gets a little bit bigger, and so it needs to be pushed up. In some cases, a whole new sound post is called for. So going on with the list of maladies that happen that first you'll notice when it gets dry are, so we've done the pegs and the sound. So the next thing you might notice is the neck is going up or down. The strings might be, in the wintertime, the strings will be a little closer to the fingerboard. Most people don't notice it until it's flat on the fingerboard, and then they do something about it. I've never had someone ask me to do that. They've noticed it as a sort of in-between stage. Anyway, so that's the next thing that you'd notice. The next is seams opening, and you may or may not notice that. They may buzz, but that is happening because of the contraction and expansion of the top of the instrument. And then finally, cracks happen, and those you'll see, and then it is really too late. So Carolyn, maybe you could give us picture one. Are you there? Oh, good. There we go. Okay, so here's a piece of wood that is that we use for the top of an instrument, and you can see clearly the definition of the year rings, and then the winter dark rings are the slow growing dark stripes, and then in between, of course, you have the summer ear rings. So when it's in a part of a tree, it can't expand, but when it's cut like this, the dark ear rings don't really move too much because they're hard, but the ear rings, the summer rings, swell up and yeah, it's where all the cellulose is, and it's being absorbed, the humidity is being absorbed by the cellulose, and it expands. Okay, let's see the next one. So what happens, here's a picture of the winter. So the summer grains lose moisture, and the wood contracts as it does so. So everything is, you see the black arrows are pointing, and everything contracts. The arching, yes, and the top of the instrument contracts, goes down. And then you will see where the red arrows are. Those are where the your seams will generally open, and you will see them. The ribs will be pushed out, so that sometimes it looks like there's not even enough edge to glue them on. And that's usually where they happen. And they happen because on those spots, the top is contracting or expanding on grain that is running a different direction. So it actually breaks the glue and pops off from the expansion, whereas it doesn't usually, you don't often get, or always, I should say, maybe, get seams opening on the flanks further out, because that's where actually the grain is running with the, anyway, the top is not running across the grain of the ribs. It's a little more confusing, but anyway, okay, so let's, oh, and then the neck at that time will probably go up on cellos about 5 millimeters, unless you have a rod in your neck of carbon graphite. That's usually what happens. Okay, let's take a look at the next one, the winter slide, number 3. So here we have the opposite, where the grains of the cellulose and the summer grains are absorbing water, and they're expanding. The ribs are being pulled out by the expansion of the top, and the neck will fall down. And then the red arrows again, those are the places where your seams will occur. And if you look, instead of being bulged out, they're being bulged in. And you'll often see parts of the white insides of the back or top because it is being pulled in. Okay. Is there, we have another one, or is that it? I think that's it. If you have questions, you're welcome. 20 minutes?
You're at 20 minutes.
Oh yeah. If you have questions, that's fine. You can ask. In the meantime, I'll go ahead.
Hello. So I'm going to give our viewers some time to type in the chat. As a string player, I have a question. I would love to start us off. So I have a particularly older instrument. Well, it's all relative, of course, but I find my cello is very finicky with humidity. So I'm very diligent about my dampits. And I'm curious though, is there a sign too much humidity, that you're providing too much? I'm always extra cautious, but I'm wondering if there's any warning signs that you're overdoing it.
Right. In the winter.
Yes.
Well, signs, yes, you would start having the seams open up if there was too much. Your the pegs might start to stick. It might feel clammy. And I've never actually had anyone ask me that question before, if you're overdoing it. But yeah, it is probably pretty hard to do, because especially in this climate, I wouldn't worry about it too much. But I was actually going to tell a story about my own shop. When I came from California out to New England, I had about 30 cellos and in our living room. And during the winter, of course, I humidified, which I was used to doing. But in the summer, I really didn't think that, I don't know what I was thinking, actually. I guess I was used to California climate, but all the necks of the instruments in a couple of weeks' time just collapsed down, and it made them unplayable. And that, of course, was due to the huge amounts of humidity that we have here in the Northeast. So over the years, I realized that I experimented and found that the magic numbers are so that you don't have instruments fall, the necks fall, sorry, is about 60%. Anything above 60%, you're in the danger zone of the fingerboard and neck going down. So if that does happen, I'm sure you're all aware, you either need to have your bridge lowered to make it more comfortable to play, or you have to make a new bridge. And I think a lot of people have two bridges just for that. But if you can keep the humidity under 60% in the summertime, and then during this, then you won't have that problem. And if you don't want to have problems with cracking, keep the humidity around 35% is good. I used to actually keep the humidity more, like 45%, thinking it was better for the instruments. But when I would send them out, they would go to environments where the humidity was much lower, usually in people's homes, it's under 30. And so if I was trying to get them interested in buying an instrument, of course, when they had it in their home after a week, it wouldn't sound good anyway. So I just decided, put it at the best thing for people is to have the humidity in the winter time for 35 to 40% is fine, somewhere in there. Anywhere lower, you're asking for it to crack. Instruments do, by the way, take a couple of weeks at least to adapt to a new environment in terms of the moisture. So it'll take that long for them to absorb humidity. And so even if it's at 30 for a couple of days, or at least in the higher humidity levels, 60%, you don't have to worry so much about it. You just change it if it gets up above that.
So was that 35% for the winter time?
35% is for the winter time. Yeah. And
fantastic.
Yeah, that's what I would do. And that's for me, of course, because we're sending instruments out. But I also think that it's better for musicians to have it down in their house, because they're going to studios and concerts where the humidity is hugely dry. And it's better to have it lower to begin with. And 35 is a safe number. And then people need to use whatever they can use. I mean, dampits, everyone I'm sure is familiar with dampits, but they really should be, they need to have, if they go out of the house, they need to have some sort of, for any amount of time, more than a couple of hours, they need to have some humidification in the instrument itself.
Fantastic. We have a question and a request from Mr. Hanani. And I remember you doing this in the summer too. He said, could you demonstrate how to straighten the bridge when it starts bending?
Oh, sure.
And while you get that situated, I found your website for our viewers who are curious. So I'm going to put that in the chat for them while you get the demonstration for the bridge.
Sure. Wouldn't it be easier to see, just move a cello bridge and then I'll move it back? Or any.
Yeah, this is tipping forward, actually. So show them first how it's tipping forward.
Yeah. I'm gonna need to aim this way.
Wow. Would you mind walking through what you did with your hands just now and where you placed them?
I was trying to make it look bad, actually, because it was straight before. But so does it look like it's bent forward?
Yes, it is slightly bent forward.
Okay, so what you want to do? Yeah. I'm not sure you can see. Can you see the back of the feet? There's a space under the bridge between the top and the bottom of the feet there. Not really, it's too far away. Anyway, there's a gap. And so you'll notice when the bridge, of course, you'll see the bridge leaning forward the way it is, and you'll notice a big gap. So the bridge is digging into the top of the instrument just on the front of the bridge and on that sharp edge there, which is really not healthy for the top. So the way to do this is I position my hands around the strings. This one's against the fingerboard, and this one is against the tailpiece, actually on the strings. And I just push with my thumb and on this hand, with this hand, and I'm just holding it so that it doesn't flip over backwards. So it'd be like that. And then I'll take a look and see if it's straight. That is straighter. And then I'll look at the space under the feet in the back. And what you want is the same amount of dark line on both sides. So this could go a little further back until I see that either they're both totally flush or they have the same amount of same line. So that's about right. This is difficult to line up, but visually you line up with the horizontal line of the ribs and the top, so that, and it should be leaning a slight bit back. Okay, is that any other questions about that?
Yes, one of our viewers asked about if you need to loosen the pegs before doing something like that for the bridge.
You know, what I see are people, they'll loosen the pegs and they'll push it up and then they tighten the pegs again and it pulls it forward. What you can do is, I would say yes, you do that a little bit, but not too much, just so that you're able to move it. And if you can't, I do have to say that it is very difficult to move cello bridges, especially if it haven't been moved in years and all the rosin from playing is in the grooves. It makes it very difficult. So you do have to loosen them. What I would do is one by one, loosen them, put pencil lead in there, and then tighten them back up almost to tightness. And if the strings aren't broken at the bridge and catching on the bridge itself, then you should be able to move it. But just, yeah, and then you can get it up to tune and push it where it needs to go. You'd be able to move it. Violins are a lot easier. Cellos are kind of daunting, and it takes someone a fair bit of courage to try to move them, especially when they're sticking. Hope that helps.
Yes, and we actually had a question too about humidifiers.
Yeah.
I am wary of dangerous bacteria that can grow in tanks and are holding water over a period of time. Mine holds 1 gallon with a 6-gallon tank. How do you deal with these concerns?
Yeah, I thought about that. I haven't ever used it because I go through water so quickly. I mean, I think a week is certainly fine for having water. I would think a drop of something like Clorox or some.
I think there's a detergent.
Yeah, and there are things that you can put in there that they sell specifically for that. If you're, if that's an issue.
But if they're dry,
Yes.
cycle through so fast.
Yeah, it really. I've never had that problem because we're always, at least in the Northeast, it's on full blast a lot of the time. Just trying to keep up, especially if you're in an old house. You're going through your humidity too quickly for anything to happen.
Great. I believe that was our last question. I am double checking, but I don't think I see any more. Do you have any final closing thoughts or tips, Francis?
Yeah, I think humidity really is the key to keep it balanced. If you do nothing else, that's the best thing that you can do for your instrument is keep it under control, and it'll sound better. It'll last longer. You won't have as many repair bills, and really, the lack of humidity is the silent killer, and it's a really, really important thing to wrap your head around, and you just have to start doing it and asking, and you'll start noticing all the different how your instrument sounds better, and you'll feel better about it because you're taking good care of it, and that's the one thing that you can do.
Great. Thank you so much, Francis, for your tips and that insight into humidity. I know a lot of people hear about humidity health being important, but I think hearing the specifics coming from you and hearing kind of more of the science and knowledge behind the wood is very important for any string player to know. So thank you so much for kind of doing a deeper dive into the world of humidity. It was really, really great, really insightful. And we want to thank also all of you for joining us today for this part of our Berkshire High Peaks Reunion Bash. And final thing in the chat for you all is a link to the Berkshire High Peaks website where we have a list of all of our events going through January 5th. And you can register for them completely free, open to the public. And later on today, we have a masterclass with, I want to say the time correctly, Irina Mirsanu at 4, and then tonight at 8 p.m. Yehuda Hanani is giving a cello master class, all Eastern Standard Time, so 4 p.m. and 8 p.m. Thank you all so much again. Thank you again to Francis. Be sure to check out his website in the chat window, and we'll see you next time for whichever event you choose. Hope you can come to many.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you. I'm sorry. I was so nervous in the beginning.